Welcome everyone to this another episode of Unlearning the Falsehoods. So far, I guess I guess we are nearing 30 episodes. And when I started this series, I wasn't really sure about how many of these episodes will this series manage to finish. So far we are almost at 30 episodes in this series of Unlearning the Falsehoods, and yeah, and there is no end to this rabbit hole. As you can see, most of our history is rather surface level. If you pick up any NCRT textbooks, any of the NCRT textbook, any standard NCRT textbook, you will see that what we are being fed in the name of history is rather surface level. It's like a journalist report in our history textbooks. That makes you wonder why exactly were such things done in the first place. Was there any motive behind it, or is there something else at play here? That is something that you must wonder. Okay, in this age of AI, x x is like a bastion of freedom speech that has managed to survive. Otherwise, if there weren't X and Elon Musk hadn't acquired X, there wouldn't exactly be conflicting opinion on the social media platforms or on the realm of social media, because you'll see that majority of the social media platforms, they are usually left leaning. Okay, and on top of that, we are pagans. Okay, so it's entirely a different story if you are a Christian or a Muslim, and you're not trying to make a career on social media. It becomes easy for you because those guys are allowed to say anything they want. Okay, but when it comes to pagans, there is this mutual beneficial alliance that the people of book have formed. Okay, that if we need to form an alliance, a mutual alliance, to corner the pagan, we will do that. But simultaneously, we will also carry out our carry out our conversion and proselytization activities. Okay, you'll see that there are multiple videos out there on the internet about conversions going on fully fledged in Punjab. It's rather comical to see many of our renditions, the sound tunes of the bhajans, they are used with a Christian flavor to lure people to Christianity. Yep, and this is all going on right under the nose of the government, but nobody does anything in the name of secularism because everyone is hell bent on proving their secular credentials. Okay, but that's again a discussion for another video series. So just a brief recap about what we have covered so far. What we saw so far was the Muslims, they were miffed with the Christians, that is British, because what did the British do? The British helped Italy to take over Libya, that was an Islamic country at that time. There were Balkan wars going on in Europe, led by Serbia, Bulgaria into conquering Turkey. That was the center of the Islamic Caliphate, so hence the Muslims were miffed. And on top of that, there was a mosque incident in Kanpur where an illegal construction of a part of a mosque, not the entire mosque, wasn't demolished, but a part of the mosque was demolished. And hence, all these three things managed to drive the Muslims away from the people, from their brother of the book, that is the Christians. And now they were looking for a political ally to check the rising influence of British. Okay, now they inevitably landed at the doorsteps of Congress, because Congress was largely moderate, and by moderate I mean they were psyoped into believing that one day, if we stay obedient and if we stay docile, one day the British will hand over the state power to us and leave happily out and leave, and it will be happily ever after. But that was not going to be the case. So yes, the Muslims were driven to the moderates in Congress. They came up again, they formed another alliance of mutual benefit, but this time it was Congress that was making rampant concessions to Muslim League without even you know Because like I said, people have this misconception inside their head where that Congress used to represent the, the sole opinion of the pagan natives. That wasn't the case. If you look at the membership of Congress, although one might argue that the members came from multiple states and multiple backgrounds, so you know it like it represents the opinion of the mass. To all those people, I would like to say, look at the charter of the Congress that was framed by the moderates. Okay, it required a written undertaking by all of them who were joining Congress to pledge their allegiance to the majesty's government, meaning they will not fight to overthrow the British government, but they will work within the framework that the British has provided for larger self determination like other British colonies. Okay, so, yes, now that the Muslims were miffed with the Christians, they ran towards the moderates with, getting their own self interests represented. Like everything else, this is also the beginning of the approach of the Congress towards appeasement and accommodation for the Muslim side. Because what happened was there was a Lucknow Pact that was signed between the League and the Congress, and majority of the concessions were made by the Congress on behalf of the pagan natives. And the worst part is, okay, they were not legitimate voice of the pagan natives. It was just the cream or the elite people who had the resources and the leisure to indulge in such political activities. Okay, so you have a double faced body over here. On the one side, Congress will claim to be secular, on the other side, they will make concessions to the Muslim League on behalf of the pagan natives. Okay, but none of our history textbooks will analyze this angle, because this will open up some very difficult and politically incorrect questions, which our population, I don't think, is ready. Because what happens in our country is, whenever we get down to discussing controversial or sensitive things, people get emotional too quickly, and the debate transforms into a dispute, and then what happens, we all know. So yes, now that the after heavy concessions from the Congress side, the Muslims were on board, presenting a united front to the British. Okay, so from 1917 onwards, 1917 to 1918, this was a very and I would say a complicated year for the political scenario in Bharat, because like we have discussed in our previous videos, in the year of 1909, there came constitutional reforms. Okay, there were constitutional reforms in 1909 that goes by the name of Morley Minto reforms. Similarly, in the year of 1919, there was also going to be another set of reforms. Like the common name to those reforms given is Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. Now, the history students will be aware about this, because this is very common knowledge. But for those of you who don't know, this was again a major reform. These Montagu and Chelmsford, these are two different individuals. One of them was viceroy, one of them was some lord. Doesn't matter right now. What matters is what went about in the background while these reforms were being discussed, and what shaped the constitutional reforms that were going to come up in 1919. The reason why these reforms are important, because the Government of India Act of 1919 is going to shape the Constitution of 47 and 1950 that was adopted later, that Bharat as a republic adopted later. Okay. Now, all these, acts, the Act of 1909, the Act of 1919, all they were framed in the Westminster Parliament in the language that is English. Okay, we have established this in the initial episodes of the series, that English language has an inherent bias. You cannot, it has an inherent Christian bias or a monotheistic bias. So imagine laws, okay, that are legislated with language that has inherent monotheistic bias, and on top of that, they are granting concessions to the Muslim, another monotheistic tradition. Okay, so this is a two-layered or two-front war against the pagans. And there were some moderates within the Congress who were adding to the cavalry of this army that was attacking on two fronts, fighting the pagans. It is what it is. But I guess our population and the people right now are mature enough to look at the facts objectively. Okay. So yes, now the reforms that were going to come about, they were in 1919. One very important global event that was taking shape and that was coming to an end in 1919 was World War One. Okay, one thing that I guess our foreign minister has also raised this issue, prime minister as well, and other political leaders as well, is in World War One. Okay, there was so much of resources that were drawn out of Bharat. Okay, manpower for the military, resources, food grains, equipment, doctors, okay, nurses, and in fact, it was Mohandas Gandhi who made a career as a person serving in the Boer War in the medical corps. Okay, but more about him in the further parts of this video, right? Like we are so close to introducing Mohandas Gandhi to this fore, but to this very episode, there has not been a single contribution by Mohandas Gandhi to the freedom movement. He's going to show up in the next episodes of this series, but right now, let's keep him on hold. Okay. So the World War One, there was immense contribution like that ran into millions of those days. There wasn't, and to this very day, there isn't any official, recognition and even acknowledgement for that matter. You know why? Because anything good that comes out of Bharat should be downplayed, and anything bad about Bharat should be amplified and exaggerated. Okay, so to maintain this psychological control over our race, so we are led into psyoped into thinking that we are an inferior race because there is nothing good about it, because things that are good about it are conveniently brushed under the carpet, and things that are bad about us are, purposefully and deliberately amplified and exaggerated. Okay. Yep. So that is now the political leaders in Britain had realized that after such war effort, people were conscious, because now that there were newspapers, magazines, there were print media published um, in the geography of Bharat, and from both the sides, from the moderates and from the extremists as well. So such a large event, obviously they are bound to cover. Okay, this news was very widespread in the elite circles that there was enormous amount of resources and manpower drawn out of Bharat to aid the British in their World War efforts. Okay, now this information spread. So the British, they were discussing in their parliament that since this information is spread, we need to make some real concessions to this nation for them to, keep them keep them interested enough to carry on with the charade of, British domination, British superiority, this idea or this seduction of this superior race. All right. So yes, there were some concessions made from the British side. The Bharat as a nation was included in, imperial war conferences and regular imperial conferences as well, and this was the beginning of admission of Bharat in British Commonwealth. Okay, Commonwealth is a group of countries, as the name signifies. It is a group of countries that were previously British colonies. Okay, embarrassingly enough, we still continue to be a part of Commonwealth. Okay, yep. So it really now really is the time to really stand up for the self respect. Okay, I'm not advocating animosity against any of the countries or any of the, like completely break off foreign relations, but all these foreign relations cannot operate under the assumption of coloniality, meaning since British were the ones who came over here and managed to, establish their dominion over Bharat for, let's say, 3 centuries. So our foreign relations, should proceed by those dynamics. I'm sure there is work being done at the highest levels on these lines, but it's not showing up in the public discourse. So yep. Now there was also something else that was showing up over here was the influence of the Irish struggle. To this very day, Ireland is a very sensitive issue for Britain. Okay, because the British claim that the Ireland and British are same nationalities. Whereas the Irish people claim that British and Irish are two different identities, they are two different nationalities. To this very day, Northern Ireland is part of UK, whereas Republic of Ireland is a separate country. Okay, so you'll see that the two nation theory is at work over there. All right. So there was this leader, Annie Besant. Students of history might already know, but there was this alliance between Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Annie Besant in forming up Home Rule League. Okay, what does the name signify? Home Rule meaning we want our own rule. In simple words, meaning Swaraj, like complete and utter sovereignty. So this particular female individual who came from Ireland, her name was Annie Besant. She established some home rule leagues. Tilak was with her. Tilak also established some home rule leagues, and they were running this movement of spreading this across the people that the idea of home rule should be inculcated in the minds of people. We cannot keep living under this idea that if we keep pandering to the British, one day out of benevolence, the British will, give us the state power. So yes, Home Rule was advocating sovereignty, that is Swaraj, and this did not go down well with the British, obviously. So initially they let it run, but after a few days or a few months, they arrested both. They arrested Bal Gangadhar Tilak on charges of sedition. Obviously, we all know the law of sedition is being the use of the law of sedition is very elastic. To this very day, I would argue that yes, sometimes the law of sedition is used in a harsh manner. But that is again a video that is again an agenda for a different video. Right now, we are going to focus on how did the British counter the sentiments of the Home Rule League. All right. Yes, Annie Besant was here. And she, like I said, she collaborated with Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and they were spreading this message to the grassroots. Okay, like I said, majority of the populace of Bharat right up until 1947, I would say, they were not politically conscious. Okay, to this very day, I would say a majority of our populace is still not politically conscious, because this has been shoved into our heads that politics is a dirty business. Politics is a very noble business. Okay, a person with nationalistic sentiments, with a nationalistic outlook, must take active interest in the politics of their nation. Okay, the farther you go from politics, the easier it becomes for the foreign forces to emancipate you, to rule you, to dominate you. Okay, so that is what happened with Congress. Okay, the elites, the English educated elites, they managed to corner majority of the seats in Congress, whereas the rural population, that is where the real Bharat resides, they stayed away from the politics, putting their faith in these leaders who completely betrayed their faith by giving their assent to partition in 47. But more about that in the upcoming videos. Right now we are going to focus on the Home Rule League. Okay, so that is what was going on. Now, what this did to the ties between the Muslim League and the Congress? Okay, like I said, the Muslim League, like it always has, was forming alliances of self-interest and looking for its own self-interests. Okay, so the Congress and the Muslim League, after Lucknow Pact, okay, they made some demands to the British. Now I'm going to read those exact demands that were made in unison by Muslim League and Congress. Let's see what is the tone of those demands. Okay, now this is in July 1917. Okay, there was a joint conference that was organized in Bombay of the All India Congress Committee and the Muslim League's Council, and these were the demands that were put to the British government. Joint demands. Okay, demand number 1 was issue of grant of self-government to India within the British Empire. So up until 1917, they were still not demanding complete independence. They were okay. Okay, they were operating under this assumption that we need to stay under the umbrella of British rule. Okay. Second is to accept the Congress League scheme for implementation after the war. They're talking about the World War. Okay, to release Besant and her supporters. Annie Besant was arrested by after the initial bout of Home Rule League, and to release pan-Islamists such as Ali Brothers and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who were under internment for their activities in support of the Ottoman Caliphate Empire. The reason why they call them pan-Islamists, because I've covered this in the previous videos. We don't talk about this enough because the Islamic coloniality is so deeply entrenched into the converted pagans of Bharat or the converted natives of Bharat that their locus of identity has shifted from the holy land of Bharat to the land of Makkah. Okay, this is continuation of thought of Dehlavi, Barelvi, Sayyid Ahmad Khan, and all those people who have carried forward that idea of Wahhabi, that Diobandi, Barelvi, and Wahhabi fusion. Okay, that managed to shift their locus of identity in West Asia to Makkah. Okay, so hence there were people from the Muslim community who were advocating, opposition to British based on the ideas of pan-Islamism. Now, this did not go down well with the British, okay, because of multiple reasons. Number one was they were obviously fighting the Ottoman Caliphate. The reason why they were fighting the Ottoman Caliphate because they were Christians. Christians and Muslims were in a war, and this has been going on since centuries. Okay, it is out of convenience that our history textbooks ignore this backdrop of our history, starting from the 18th right up until 47 to the transfer of power. Okay, majority of the decisions that were taken in the Westminster have been influenced by this war between both the people of the book. Okay, so yes, the British, they were not ready to release these Islamists because remember they had discovered a huge Wahhabi network as well during the Anglo-Sikh wars. Okay, so they were pretty much willing to err on the side of the caution. Okay. So the joint demands of the League and Congress was to release of these pan-Islamists, the Ali brothers that were arrested, and Annie Besant. Surprisingly, the British conceded to the demand of release of Annie Besant but not Ali brothers. Now one would think, a rational mind would think that why exactly did not they release? Weren't they both the people of the book? Wasn't there some sort of proximity? Like I would say, Muslims were more proximate to Christians than to the pagans. And that goes for both. Christians were more proximate to the Muslims rather than the pagans, that is us. Then why exactly were they wry or suspicious about, the actions of the Muslims, these pan-Islamists? So they release Annie Besant, but they don't release these Ali brothers. Now we are in 1917. Keep in mind there were major reforms that were going to come up in 1919 in the form of Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. So this is Secretary of State Montagu speaking in House of Commons in Westminster. Let's see what he had to say. The policy of His Majesty's government, with which government of India are in complete accord, is that the increasing association of Indians in every branch of administration and the gradual development of self-governing institutions with a view to the progressive realization of responsible government in India as an integral part of the British Empire. Okay, this is him speaking in the Westminster. He is clear of the fact. Okay, up until 1917, there was no discussion of granting complete independence. Okay, I would add that the progress in this policy can only be achieved by successive stages. The British government and the government of India, on whom the responsibility lies for the welfare and advancement of the Indian peoples, must be the judges of time and measure of each advance. And they must be guided by the cooperation received from those upon whom new opportunities of service will thus be conferred, and by the extent to which it is found that confidence can be reposed in their sense of responsibility. Okay, so this is being spoken in the House of Commons. So far, even after, let's say, moving far away from their alliance with the Muslims, being miffed with the Revolutionary Front, being agitated and irritated by the Revolutionary Front, they were still not of the opinion that, the natives, the pagan natives of Bharat, should be granted state power and complete and absolute sovereignty. They were still operating under the assumption that uh, all that the major populace of Bharat needs is self-determination within the British Empire. Now, why did they think so? What was the source of this idea that the British had? Because the moderates adopted this stand. Who were the moderates? The English educated elites that were the product of this downward trickling theory of that if you educate the elites, the knowledge would percolate downwards, which clearly was not the case. Okay, now all the moderates, they claim to speak on the behalf of the majority of the population, but they clearly weren't. Okay, so you see the cycle of events. The stand that the moderates took led the British to believe that the majority of the population was not uh, you know opting for complete and utter sovereignty. So you see these chain of errors. Okay, now all this was planned and executed very cunningly by the British. Okay, and our history textbooks will conveniently ignore this. One wonders why. All right, so yeah. Now, like there was Shimla deputation. Some of the Muslim community members went to Shimla to present their uh, demands before the constitutional reforms that were going to come up in 1909. Similar effort was made also in 1919 as well, 19 before the constitutional reforms of 1919 as well. But this time, they were not obliged by the viceroy. Viceroy was like, okay, we are still, uh, paying the cost for the promises that were made by the erstwhile Lord to the Muslim community in 1909. We are not going to add to those promises because that is what the Muslim League did. Okay, they will keep on asking concessions. Similar had been the experience of Congress. Okay, the deal between Congress and the Muslim League was highly, unbalanced in the favor of the Muslim League because all they were doing was they're demanding concessions, and the Congress, okay, was willingly giving it. Why? Because they wanted to establish their secular credentials. Okay, and how were they establishing their secular credentials? By granting these concessions on behalf of the pagan community, but they don't stand for that pagan community. They've all this while maintained that we are secular. Then how come you were giving concessions on behalf of the pagan community? Something for you to ponder about, something for you to think and appeal to your reason. Okay, use your sense of reason and try to hammer out a rational conclusion as to why was Congress doing this. Okay, let me destroy the suspense for you. Congress was vying for political power. They were not vying for independence. They were not vying for uh, complete and utter sovereignty. All they wanted was to replace the British and put themselves in that place. So it was a power struggle. It wasn't an independence struggle. All right. Like I have mentioned in the earlier part of this video. Now the Muslim League had realized that we can exact a lot of concessions out of Congress because the Congress was hell bent on convincing the British that we are a secular body. Okay, now people forget the role of the safety valve theory and Alan Octavian Hume. Okay, to give you an analogy to understand this better is the moderates were undercover agents of the British, working for the interests of the British state, not for the interests of the pagan natives. All right, so to understand this dynamic, you'll have to see the Muslims will keep on asking more concessions from the moderates, which the moderates will almost always readily oblige. Okay, the moderates were in turn controlled by the British. So you see how they were controlling Muslims indirectly, how they were controlling the Muslim League indirectly. Okay, So yes, so far what they had conceded, what had the Congress conceded to the Muslim League? Number one was they agreed to the communal electorates. Number two, they agreed to this idea of communal veto. We have already discussed this communal veto, meaning if there was any legislation that was discussed in the legislative bodies, if three-fourth of the Muslim community objects to it, okay, that law cannot be enacted further. Number three, anytime there was a riot, and like this history of riots has been continuously going on. There was no point in time in Bharat's history when there were no riots. Okay, there have always been riots, more specifically at the time of the festivals. The radical and fundamentalist elements from within the Muslim community, they have instigated and stoked these riots. Okay, so it has been a lived reality for more than 7-8 centuries now. It's not like only after 1947 and the establishment of the RSS and the Jan Sangh, they started this idea of communal polarization. The community has been polarized, since I would argue 12th century onwards, 11th or 12th century onwards. But more about it, I'm definitely going to talk about it in the future videos of this channel. But right now we are going to focus on this. All right. So far they had managed to extract a lot of concessions out of the moderates, which in turn were being controlled by their political masters in the Westminster and the British. Okay. So yes. So it was against this background. Okay, moderates being controlled by the British, Muslims continuously asking for concessions from the moderates, and the moderates readily obliging. It is under this backdrop and in this background that Mohandas Gandhi enters the politics. Okay, keep in mind we are in the year of 1919. This is where you will find the entry of Mohandas Gandhi. Now, one very important thing before we end this episode and this video is right after the constitutional reforms came in 1919, what did it do? What was one clear, what was the one clear and I would say explicit crystallization of this idea of two nationhood? Okay. 1919, they established that indeed the pagans and the converted Muslims, they were two separate nations. Now, this continuum of thought, starting from, Dehlavi, then being passed on to Barelvi, then many other scholars who fused it with the idea of Deoband, then Wahhabism. So it had come to fruition in the year of 1919. Okay, this idea of two different nations, okay, was clearly established with permanence. Okay. Now let me just give you a parallel example. All right. Why are Bharat and China two different nations? Because they are two different races. All right. So this distinction of nations is more solidly rooted in the idea of race. Whereas if you see the converted natives, who were almost all of them have been forcefully converted, if they were demanding a separate nation, their demand of separate nation was rooted where? Because since they were converted, they cannot be of a separate race. Okay, so their conception of a different nation was rooted in their religious ideology and theology, not on being a different race. Okay, keep in mind, a Punjabi or a Haryanvi is no different from a person who speaks Tamil, Telugu, or Malayalam. They are not two different races. Even a person who speaks Urdu is no different from a person who speaks Gujarati. Okay, so how exactly in a matter of 3 or 4 centuries, people who were forcefully converted were made to believe or led to believe that they were a separate nation? okay, from their own race. Okay, this is something that we need to ponder about, and we will unpack this idea further in the upcoming episodes in this series of unlearning the falsehoods. That's it for this episode. Thank you for watching.